Yeah.
And one of the most fundamental, one of the things taught by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, and it's a classic technique used in nearly probably every tradition, sometimes gets called witnessing, which can sound a bit dry, really. It's more like a compassionate witnessing, or appreciative embracing of experience, that you're aware of that which is conscious, that there is this presence which is everywhere, within which experience is arising. So you're aware not just of the experience, but of your being, which is the experiencer. And then you can see, look, there is what I am is not a person. What I am is witnessing Tim. What I am is seeing what Tim is.
Because I know I'm not a person because I can see the person. If I can see it, I can't be just that.
Exactly that. And also, what fascinates me is that every night the person dissolves. But what I am is still there. And I appear to be other things in other worlds, in my dreams. But what I am is still there. And so we're shown every day in the cycle of waking and sleeping, there is something which is always there and doesn't change. Something somebody said to me years ago at one of my seminars really stuck with me. She was a lady in her 80s, and she said, this is easy to understand when you get older, because I'm the same now as when I was 18. And, I feel that. Do you feel that, Ian? I'm exactly, nothing's changed. Now, this is change. It
doesn't work so well.
It's like, this is all different, really. And my personalities, I hoped, changed and got more mature, more stupid, probably. My body's different. But what I am, something doesn't change.
Yeah.
Something is it just is. And so as I become conscious of being conscious, I'm aware of my being, that which is.
And then you did something very unusual. You went to see Sai Baba, and you took your parents with you. Excuse me. That's very unusual. The thought of taking my parents to see Sai Baba would not be something I would ever think about. But how did that come about?
Well, my girlfriend was into Sai Baba, and we all wanted to go off somewhere. And so I said, well, let's go to the ashram. We can see a bit of India. We can experience the ashram. My parents are very adventurous. They, at that period, and a bit earlier, they got into some meditation, and they were interested in exploring things. So I thought, well, let's all go. So I went to the Sai Baba ashram and absolutely hated it. At the risk of alienating all those people who love Sai Baba, I really didn't get on very well with it. Partly because I'd been involved previously with a big guru, and had enough.
Who was the big guru?
I'd been involved when I was much younger with Maharaji, the Prem Rawat, who was the boy guru.
Oh, right, that's right, yeah.
So I'd been involved in that when I was a teenager, and in my 20s a little bit, and had had been very part of it, and it'd been very cultish, and it'd been great, but also had been not so good in other ways. And then to be back with all of that kind of God-man thing, it's just not for me. The distance was too great. It was too religious. Everything
it led to something, didn't it? Because your girlfriend was taken to hospital, and then you want to tell the story of how you...
Well, having got to this place where I was thinking, what am I doing here? I don't want to be here. What I want is to be with someone like Nisargadatta, who was a feisty philosopher you could question. Go, oh, hang on a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And he'd go, oh, and he'd actually interact, and it was real, and it was small, instead of this massive kind of worship, guru worship thing. And I went to my girlfriend got extremely ill, and I took her to the hospital. And while she was being seen, there was a guy, an American guy, waiting in the hospital room, and he was reading this book, and it was doing that strange thing of going, woo, 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 and I thought, what is that about that book? And then I overcame my British sort of reticence, and went, excuse me, sorry to interrupt you reading, but what's that book? And he looked at me and went, have you ever heard of Nisargadatta Maharaj? And I went, yeah. A huge, important person. His books had taken me to India in a way. And he said, well, this is written by one of his students. Nisargadatta's now dead, but this guy, he used to be president of the Bank of India. He's a man called Ramesh Balsekar, and this book is called A Duet for One. And he said, you can meet him in the morning in Bombay. If you go, you just go and see him. Wow, my goodness. And we had 2 days left in India before we flew back. So I went and rounded up my family and went, look, please, we've got to leave here. We've got to get a plane somehow, got to get to Bombay, and I've got to meet this guy. And we did. We crept in. I had a few hours with this delightful white-haired gentleman sitting in a rocking chair with a handful of people who was very kind to me. You know, the minute I arrived, he just took his attention from whatever else he was talking about, placed it completely with me, and dedicated that time to conversing deeply with me. We had an incredibly profound conversation. And
because you told him about your I am not a person.
I told him about that. I mean, I just said where I'd been at. I think the telling moment was I'd just written my first book, which was a version of the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, which had been a massive book for me, and I'd done my own rendering of that. And his whole thing, he asked me, how did you become an author? And I said, it just happened. And his eyes looked up, because his whole teaching was, look, everything is just happening.
Yeah.
There is no personal volition in any of this. There's one flow. There is only the oneness. And that idea of there being no doer of anything just melted away any misunderstanding about that space I'd entered through the Nisargadatta. That, oh my God. And as I left that conversation, which had probably been, an hour and a half, everything was different. I'd met someone who wasn't there. He'd been able to resonate with me in such a way that the whole journey just went boom, right.
So when you say you met somebody that wasn't there, what do you mean by that?
That Ramesh is somebody who had just fundamentally seen through the separateness, and had there was, the words are difficult to express here because I'm saying Ramesh has done this, and I'm sure he'd be the first to go, look, there is no Ramesh to do this. But in him, there was an embodiment of that state of consciousness which knows that all is one.
And how did you feel that in him?
Oh, that's a really hard question to answer, Ian. I don't know that I did. I think I felt it in me.
You felt it in you?
Yeah. I think what happened was that the change started happening in me, and my state of consciousness began.
From him
the same thing which had happened to me in, I'm sure, a much lesser way when I said when I was younger and throughout my life, that if I go deeply into this place and I'm with others, then, I've been around when I was a teenager and in my 20s, I would often be around people who'd wake up for the first time, because I was exploring this and they wouldn't know what it is, and then the next thing they'd know, often within an hour, they'd be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And because we have that effect on each other. It's nothing about me, it's nothing about Ramesh, it's everybody. We're all like him. Ramesh was there in this and was therefore able to convey it, and also very clear. He's a very clear thinker. Yeah. So his ability as a philosopher, which I like, was to express this very, very simply and directly, and then in his books also I found that. And bizarrely, that magic way, when life becomes a dream, when you see its dreamlike nature, then bizarre things happen. And I found myself walking out of the room into Bombay, this noise and heat, and thinking, I have just got to sit somewhere, and I need somewhere cool. Because I just got to take in what's happened. Yeah. And I look across the road, and there is a bookshop with air conditioning, big bookshop. Up until this point, my first book had just come out. When you're a first-time author, it's a big thing. And secretly, what you really want to do is see your book in a bookshop. Well, a lot of books were released. It had been out in the UK for a while. I had not seen it in one bookshop. I'd never watched anyone on the tube reading it, none of that, it's like, it was invisible. And then, on that particular moment, in the middle of Bombay, I walk into this bookshop, and there, staring me straight in the face, is my book. And bizarrely, about Lao Tzu, this Chinese sage, and Ramesh probably was a living embodiment of the Tao, of that tradition. And I thought, God, that is just so strange.